Okay, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. How are you today? And I hope we are always fine every day. Today is 10th group's presentation, and I am as the first presenter that will be explain about micro skill of reading comprehension. We have to know that reading skill here is not a way of reading words or sentences in English, but reading skill is the ability to read various literature such as newspaper, novel, magazine, and its others. Well, to improve reading skill, what is done is often to read a lot of writing in English so that we can understand various texts, because reading requires a lot of understanding. We have to read various texts in English more often. The thing that might be a little fun in improving reading is reading various novels and stories in English. So in here there is some skill that important that support our reading. That is, there are 14 ways. That is, number one is discriminate among the descriptive, grapheme, and orthographic pattern of English. Number two, retain chunk of language of different length in short-term memory. Number three, process writing at an efficient rate of speed to suit the purpose. Number four, recognize a chord of word and interpret of order pattern and their significance. Number five, recognize grammatical word classes such as noun, verb, and its others. System like example, tense, agreement, pluralization, pattern, rule, and elliptical form. Number six, recognize that a particular meaning may be expressed in different grammatical form. Number seven, recognize cohesive device in written discourse and their role in signaling the relationship between and among clauses. Number 8, recognize the rhetorical form of written discourse and their significance for interpretation. Number 9, recognize the communicative function of written text according to form and purpose. Number 10 is intercontext. Infer context that is not explicit by using background knowledge. 11 is interlinks and connection between event, ideas, and each other. Deduce causes and effect and detect such relation as mind idea, supporting idea, new information, given information, generalization, and exemplification. Number 12 is distinguish between literal and implied meaning. Number 13 is detect culturally specific references and interpret them in a context of the appropriate cultural schemata. Number 14 is develop and use a battery of reading strategies such as scanning and skimming, detecting discourse markers, guessing the meaning of word from context, and activating schemata for the interpretation of text. That is the micro skill of reading comprehension. So for the next presentation, that will be explained by my friends. Okay, thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I will continue the explanation, and this topic is strategies for reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is primarily a matter of developing appropriate, efficient comprehension strategies. Some strategies are related to bottom-up procedures and others enhance the top-down processes. Following are 10 such strategies, each of which can be practically applied to your classroom techniques. The first strategy is identifying the purpose in reading. How many times have you been told to reading something yet you didn't know why you are being asked to reading it? You did only a mediocre job of retraining what you read and perhaps were rather slow in the process. Efficient reading consists of clearly identifying the purpose in reading something. By doing so, you know what you are looking for and can without potential distracting information. Whenever you are teaching a reading technique, make sure students know their purpose in reading something. The second strategy is use graphic rules and patterns to aid in bottom-up decoding, especially for beginning level learners. At the beginning level of learning English, one of the difficulties students encounter in learning to read is making the correspondence between spoken and written English. In many cases, learners have become acquainted with oral language and have some difficulty learning English spelling conversation. They may need hints and explanations about certain English orthographic rules and particularities. While you can often assume that one-to-one grapheme phoneme correspondence will be acquired with age. Other relationships might prove difficult. Consider how you may provide hints and pointers on such patterns as this. Short vowel sound is VC patterns like but, beam, like, with, and etc. And long vowel sound in VCI, final silent A, patterns late, time, but, and etc. Then long vowel sound in VV patterns like sheet, coat, and etc. And the last is distinguishing hard C and G from soft C and G like cat versus city, came versus came, and etc. There's an multitude of other phonics approaches to reading can prove useful for learners at the beginning level and especially useful for teaching children and non-literate adults. The third is use efficient silent reading techniques for relatively rapid comprehensions for intermediate to advanced levels. Um, if you are teaching beginning level students, this particular strategy will not apply because they are still struggling with the control of a limited vocabulary and grammatical patterns. Your intermediate to advanced level students need not be speed readers, but you can help them increase efficiency by teaching a few silent reading rules. Like you don't need to pronounce each word to yourself. Try to visually perceive more than one word at a time, preferably precise. And unless a word is absolutely crucial to global understanding, skip over it and try to infer its meaning from its context. The fourth is skim the text for main ideas. Perhaps the two most valuable reading strategies for learners as well as native speakers are skimming and scanning. Skimming consists of quickly running one's eyes across a whole text, such as an essay, article, or chapter, for it gives. Skimming gives readers the advantage of being able to predict the purpose of the passage, the main topic or message, and possibly some of the developing or supporting ideas. This gives them a head start as they embark on more focused reading. You can train students to skim passages by giving them, say, 30 seconds to look through a few pages of material, close their books, and then tell you what they learned. The fifth is scan the text for specific informations. The second in the most valuable category is scanning or quickly searching for some particular pieces of information in a text. Scanning exercise may ask students to look for names or dates, to find a definition of a key concept, or to list a certain number of supporting details. The purpose of scanning is to extract specific information without reading through the whole text. For academic English, scanning is absolutely essential. In vocational of general English, scanning is important in dealing with generalized schedules, manuals, from, and etc. Six is use semantic mapping or clustering. Readers can easily be overwhelmed by a long string of ID of or events. The strategy of semantic mapping or grouping ideas in meaningful clusters help the readers to provide some order to the cause. Making such semantic maps can be done individually, but they make for a productive group work techniques as students collectively induce order and hierarchy to a passage. Early draft of these maps can be quite messy, which is perfectly acceptable. You can see in figure in your book, figure 18.1. And for example, shows a first attempt by a small group of students to draw a semantic map of an article by Rick called Between Fire and Ice. The plan the plans an article about a total solar eclipse as seen through the eyes of village in Batu, Java. Next is quest when you aren't certain. This is an extremely broad category. Learners can use questing to their advantage to guess the meaning of word, guess a grammatical relationship like pronoun reference, then guess a discourse relationship, infer implied meaning between the lines, guess about a culture reference, and guess content message. Then you can help learners to become accurate guesses by encouraging them to use effective compensation strategies in which they will gaps in their competence by intelligent attempt to use whatever clues are available to them. Language-based clues include word analysis, word word associations, and textual structures. And the eighth strategy is analyze vocabulary. One way for learners to make guessing pay off when they don't immediately recognize a word is to analyze it in terms of what they know about it. Several techniques use several techniques are useful here. The first is look for prefixes, co, inter, and etc. They may give clues. Then look for suffixes like shen, thief, ally, and etc. that may indicate what part of speech it is. Look for roots that are familiar. For example, ferning may be a word a student doesn't know, but recognizing that the root fen comes from Latin to come would yield the meaning to come in between. Then look for grammatical context that may signal information. And the last is look at the semantic context topic for clues. The next strategy is distinguish between literal and implied meanings. This requires the application of sophisticated to down processing skill. The fact that not all language can be interpreted appropriately by attending to its literal syntactic surface structures makes special demand on readers. Implied meaning usually has to be differed from processing pragmatic information, as in the following example is Bill walked in the field classroom and immediately noticed Bob sitting by the open window. Brrr, he exclaimed simultaneously, seeing Bob and the open windows. It is so cold in here, Bob. Bob glanced up from his book and called, "Oh, all right, I'll close the window." Then the policeman held up his hand and stopped the car. Mary heard the ice cream man coming down the street. They remembered her birthday money and rushed into the house. Each of these excerpts has implied information. The request in A is obvious only if the reader recognizes the nature of many indicate requests in which we ask people to do things without ever forming a question. We cannot be sure in B if the policeman literally physically stopped the car with his hand, but the assumption is that this is a traffic policeman whose hand signal was obeyed by a driver. Ramelhardt's classic example in C leads the reader without any other context to believe Mary is going into the house to get money to buy ice cream until the last few words are supplied and locked the door. And the last strategy is capitalize on discourse marker to process relationships. Many discourse markers in English signal relationship among ideas as expressed thought phrase, clause, and sentence. A clear comprehension of such marks can greatly enhance learners' reading efficiency. You can look in your book at table 18.2. Enumerate almost 100 of these markers with which learning of intermediate proficiency level ought to be thoroughly familiar. That's all for my explanation. The next explanation will be delivered my friend. Thank you so much.
Okay, for the next is type of classroom reading performance. In this case, there are two types of classroom reading performance. What are they? For the first is oral and silent reading, and the second is intensive and extensive reading. Oral and silent reading. At the beginning and intermediate level, oral and reading can serve as an evaluative check on bottom-up processing skill, double as a pronunciation check, and serve to add some extra student participation if you want to highlight a certain short segment of a reading passage. While for the advanced level, usually only advantage that can be gained by reading orally. As a rule of thumb, you want to use oral reading to serve these three purposes because the disadvantage of too much oral reading can easily come into play. Oral reading is not a very authentic language activity. While one student is reading, others can easily lose attention or be silently rehearsing the next paragraph. It may have the outward appearance of student participation when in reality it is more recitation. And for the next slide is intensive and extensive reading. Silent reading may be subcategorized into intensive and extensive reading. Intensive reading, analogous to intensive listening that described in chapter 16, is usually a classroom-oriented activity in which students focus on the linguistic or semantics detail of a passage. Intensive reading calls student attention to grammatical forms, discourse markers, and other surface structure details for the purpose of understanding literal meaning, implication, rhetorical relationship, and the like. While extensive reading is carried out to achieve a general understanding of usually somewhat longer text, book, long article, or essay, and others. Most extensive reading is performed outside of class time. Pleasure reading is other extensive, technical, scientific, and professional reading can, under certain special circumstances, be extensive when one is simply striving for global or general meaning from longer passage. Okay, for the next will be explanation by my partner.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Alisa Almasifani and I will continue the material about principles for designing interactive reading techniques. In this material, there are 8 techniques. Number 1 is in an interactive curriculum, make sure that you don't overlook the importance of specific instruction in reading skills. ESL students who are literate in their own language sometimes are left to their own devices when it comes to learning reading skills. We often assume that they will learn good reading simply by absorption through generous offerings of extensive reading opportunities. In reality, there is much to be gained by focusing on reading skills. This chapter has provided some guidelines on how to direct their focus. On the other hand, it should be clear from previous comments in this chapter that it's important to make sure that your students have ample time for extensive reading. Sustained silent readings allows them to develop a sense of fluency. Also, silent reading then becomes an excellent method for self-instructions on the part of the learner. Number two is use techniques that are intrinsically motivating. One popular and intrinsically motivating approach to reading instructions is the language experience approach or LEA, referred to in chapter 15, where students create their own material for reading. Other approaches in which learners are given choices in selecting reading material offer a degree of intrinsic motivation. Carefully sequenced readings and instructional strategies that are success oriented give further intrinsic involvement in the process. Another way to enhance intrinsic motives is to offer opportunities for learners to coach their progress through periodic instructor-initiated and self-assessments. Number three is balance, balance authenticity and readability in choosing text. By now, the importance of authentic language should be more than clear, but in teaching reading, one issue that has invited some controversy is the advisability of what are called simplified texts, in which an otherwise authentic text is edited to keep language within the proficiency level of a set of students. In order for you to make a decision on this issue, it is important to distinguish between A. Simple text and B. Simplified text and sources of complexity in reading material. Authentic simple text can either be devised or located in the real world, from ads to labels to reports to essays. Texts are available that are grammatically and lexically simple, simplify, and existing potential reading selection may not be necessary. Yet, if simplification must be done, it is important to preserve the natural redundancy, humor, wit, and other captivating features of the original material. Second, you might ask yourself what simplicity is and then determine if a so-called simplified text is really simpler than its original. Sometimes, simplified texts remove so much natural redundancy that they actually become difficult, and what you perceive as textual complexity may be more a product of background schemata than of linguistic complexity. Take another look at the list of characteristics of written language earlier in this chapter, and you will no doubt see what it is that makes a text difficult. In light of those criteria, is a simplified text really simpler? The answer may be no. Richard Day and Julian Pamford, 1998 and 53, in Warning Against the Cult of Authenticity and the Myth of Simplification, contended that our CLT approach has overemphasized the need for so-called authenticity and that there is indeed a place for simplified text in reading instructions. Number four is encourage the development of reading strategies. Already in this chapter, 10 different reading strategies have been discussed. To what extent are you getting your students to use all these strategies? So you have to encourage the development of the reading. Number five is include both bottom-up and top-down techniques. In our quest for communicative, authentic language activity in the classroom, we sometimes forget that learners can indeed benefit from studying the fundamental. Make sure that you give enough classroom time to focusing on building blocks of written language, geared appropriately for each level. Number six is follow the SQ3R sequence. One effective series of procedures for approaching or reading text has come to be labeled the SQ3R technique, a process consisting of the following five steps. The first is survey. You have to skim the text for an overview of main ideas. The second is question. The reader asks questions about what he or she wishes to get out of the text. Then 3R. The first R is read. Read the text while looking for answers to the previously formulated questions. The second R is recite. Process the salient points of the text through oral or written language. And the last R is review. Assess the importance of what one has just read and incorporate it into long-term associations. This series of techniques, of course, may not fit all classes and contexts, but it serves as a general guide for a reading class. The next is subdivided your techniques into pre-reading, during reading, and after reading phases. A good rubric to keep mind for teaching reading is the following three-part framework. The first is pre-reading or before you read. Spend some time introducing a topic, encouraging skimming, scanning, predicting, and activating schemata. Students can bring the best of their knowledge and skills to a text when they have been given a chance to ease into the passage. And second is during reading or while you read. Not all reading is simply extensive or global reading. There may be certain facts or rhetorical devices that students should take note of while they read. Give students a sense of purpose for reading rather than just reading because you ordered it. The last is uh, after reading after reading phases or after you read. Comprehension questions are just one from a form of activity appropriate for post-reading. Also consider vocabulary study, identifying the author's purpose, discussing the author's line of reasoning, examining grammatical structures, or steering students toward a follow-up writing exercise. Then number 8 is build in some evaluative aspect to your techniques. Consider some of the following offered responses that indicate comprehensions. There are 9. Number 1 is doing. The reader responds physically to a comment. The second is choosing, while the reading selects from alternative posts orally or in writing. Number 3 is transferring. The reader can summarize orally what is read. Number 4 is answering. The reading answers questions about the passage. Number 5 is condensing. The reader outlines or takes notes on a passage. Number 6 is extending. Uh, the reader provides an ending to a story. Number 7 is duplicating. The reader translates the message into the native language or copies it. For beginning level, for very short passage only. Number 8 is modeling. The reader puts together a toy, for example, after reading direction for assembly. And number 9 is conversing. The reader engages in a conversation that indicates appropriate processing of information. Uh, I think that's all for my material. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, maybe just that from our presentation. Keep spirit and also stay healthy. Thank you and see you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.